Baseplan presents video features how to streamline your purchasing process for new equipment, focusing on the following areas: setting up preferred vendors, buy prices and depreciation schedules, sending a request for quote to vendors and tracking outstanding requests, converting vendor quotes to purchase orders, updating equipment specification and serial numbers, receiving purchase orders and automatically creating rental equipment and assets.
I'm currently logged into an instance of Baseplan Enterprise, and before we start this webinar, I want to really go through what I mean by streamlining your purchasing processes. Now, when we purchase new equipment, there's a lot of people that might be involved along the way. For example, you might have someone that's responsible for negotiating the price with the actual vendor. We might have someone that's responsible for creating the purchase order and getting those amounts approved. We could have someone that's responsible for creating the actual asset and setting up the depreciation method and all those sort of things. We might have someone that's responsible for actually inducting the equipment into our rental fleet so then the branches can start renting the equipment out. So there's a lot of different stages in that, and it might be done in multiple systems or even in spreadsheets. So I want to talk through how we can actually utilize one of the modules in Baseplan to actually streamline this process. Now in Baseplan, there's also other ways of purchasing things. So I think it's a good opportunity for me to highlight what I think the best possible way of purchasing rental equipment is. So we're going to start off by going over to the purchase order module and clicking on the request for quote screen. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to choose some particular sets of data and equipment that I want to talk to our vendors about and request quotes so then we can generate purchase orders in the future. So I can go on add new, and I can choose the type of equipment that I want to purchase. So maybe I want to purchase an excavator, for example, and I can choose the model that I want to purchase as well. You can see here, it's automatically pulled through the models that relates to excavator. And this one here, this top one, this Caterpillar 336FL has been set up as my preferred purchase. So when I click on this, it's going to try and look up the system and pull through any information it knows about that particular excavator. Now I can also set up the quantity of units that I want to purchase. I can say 2. And if I do know the warranty standard, I can also update the warranty months that's going to be in, and that's going to flow through our service module automatically. Now, depending on my security, I can also change around the particular minor codes and account codes and where I actually want this transaction to hit in our general ledger. And when I hit save, you'll see I've got my item here that I'm looking to actually request a quote for and eventually create a purchase order for. And we've got the preferred vendor that's come through automatically. And you can see here, it's grabbed the price based upon my configuration in the system. And so if I was to go into the make model screen, for instance, we can actually see how we can configure this. So if I was to look up that same item, the excavator, and I looked up that Caterpillar item, and we go down to the bottom right here, we can see there's the purchase information. So we can set up the preferred purchase, who the vendor is, and then what the standard buy price is going to be. And on the top section here, we can also set up what the depreciation schedule is going to be, which will flow into the system automatically when we actually create that asset in this process. So let's go back to our request for quote. Now, once this is saved, what we can do is we can go up to actions and we can say that we want to send the RFQ. And what this is going to do is, depending how we configure the system, we can either send this RFQ directly to the vendors by putting in an email address, or we can actually send it off to the branches to approve and then start talking to their vendors. Really depends on how you manage your purchasing, whether it's centralized or whether you allow that permission to be put out to the actual locations. So I can say yes. And you'll see here a screen appears, which I can then email this off to the vendor. So I can say mark.simonson@baseplan.com, and we can set up a template which is going to pull through all the information about the equipment that we're looking to purchase, and then they can come back to us with some pricing. Now you can see the status here has now updated to sent, and then the vendor would come back to us and maybe they want to just confirm that maybe now it's $280,000, or maybe we're going to add another line in here and we don't know what the price is for the other particular brand, and we can start updating that information. Once we've got all that information, we can then go up to actions. We can say allocate equipment and asset codes. So what this is going to do is this is going to put a hold on an asset number and an equipment, and then we can convert that to a purchase order. Say yes. And you can see here, it's automatically generated a request for quote induction form where it's given us the asset numbers. So the people internally that are going to be receiving the equipment can be prepared. Now you can see that the status is now changed to allocated. So what we can do is we can actually go up to actions and then convert this to a purchase order. Now what I can also do is before I convert it to a purchase order, maybe we're still waiting for some pricing to come in from other vendors. So I can go to outstanding requests and see what vendors still haven't come back to us on particular pricing. We can follow them up. So if I go up to actions and I click on convert purchase order, it's going to either choose the cheapest vendor on the list, or it'll convert the item that I've actually selected. So we've got one selected here. You can see here the status has changed to converted, and that's automatically created a purchase order in the system that someone can then go through. So I can double click on this line, and it's filled out the entire purchase order automatically and put 2 detail lines of 2 excavators. And depending on my authority, I could then confirm this, or I can get approval by other people using our workflow system. So once this has been confirmed, we are now waiting for these 2 excavators to be receipted. So we're going to have a team that should be receiving the equipment, whether it's being received at the particular locations or whether it's being received at one of your warehouses. Those people will then be waiting for the equipment to arrive. And so the way that they're going to work from this is that they're going to use a screen called the PO pending equipment receipts. So I've set this up as a favorite down the bottom here. And what we can do is we can go up here, and let's say that the excavator's turned up and it's come with the paperwork. I can type in the vendor name, for example, so Caterpillar. And I can filter, and it's going to show me all the pieces of equipment that we're expecting to be receipted from Caterpillar. I can then type in the purchase order number. So we should have a purchase order number on the invoice that we've actually received with the equipment, but we can also check the purchase order number right here as well. And when I type in the purchase order number, so 200-326, and I click on filter, you can see these fields open up. So I can then start this receipting process. Before I start choosing an amount, I can double click on this specs section, and it's going to pull through the standard specs for the equipment as well. And we can set this up in the make model screen. And when I go through to this, I can choose I'm receiving one item. I can update the serial number, so I can put the number in there, and any other information I want to update in my spec screen. I can update the date that we're actually inducting the asset into our fleet. I can do the same for the second line. And so once I've entered all this information in, my second date, I can then go up here and I will need to confirm the quantity entered matches the quantity received. And this is really where the magic happens. So I hit 2, because it's 2 items that have been received, and I hit receive. Now when I put my initials in here, what the system's going to do is it's going to create a receipt automatically. And if we go back to our RFQ screen, and we go up to view now, we can actually view the assets that have been automatically generated by the system. So there's been 2 asset lines that have been created based upon all the information that we entered at the beginning. So if I double click on this line, we can see the assets being created, the purchase date, price, the right GL group, the original purchase order and the receipt. It's linked to a piece of equipment. And if I double click on this, it'll take me through the equipment as well. And we can see that there's a piece of equipment now that can be rented out. And we can actually manage this process where we can have a 2-stage activation. So once it gets receipted, we can then have someone approved to then activate it so the branches can now rent it out, or we can do it like I've just done and automatically have the activation kick in. Now you can see by doing this, it's really taken out a lot of the manual steps in that process, and it's really streamlined the way we're actually inducting rental assets into our rental business. And that just about wraps up today's session. Following the webinar, there'll be a short survey. This will give you the opportunity to request future topics and provide general feedback. I look forward to seeing everyone in a future Baseplan Presents webinar.